This week's episode of Fireside is brought to you by Legends of Belize, Diva by Sarah, and Wonders Oddities Expo.
Hello, everybody. You're listening to Fireside Paranormal Podcast. My name is Jordan Cline, and as always, I have a fun show planned out for today. My guest tonight is author Nick Pease. Before we get to him, just a few announcements.
Want to add some individuality to your drinkware? Diva by Sarah can help. Tumblers, sippy cups, flip tops, and even glow-in-the-dark tumblers available. With tons of designs to choose from and new designs being added all the time. You can order at www.divabysarah.com. Or, if you're local, buy products in-store at Connie's Creative Collective at the Ohio Valley Mall. Have a school or organization that needs a great fundraiser? We can do that too. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Diva by Sarah to see new products, learn about giveaways, and more.
Legends of Belize is a series about mythical creatures that dwell in the jungles and waters of Belize. The Belizean legends are captured, documented, and preserved like never before in a comprehensive art series and books with fully colored and detailed images of fine art by artists, authors, and award-winning animators Dismas and Grissi G. Discover the supernatural creatures that await deep in the jungles, such as the mysterious dwarf called Tata Duende with backwards feet known to rip the thumbs off of trespassers, or the beautiful shape-shifting woman known to locals as the Ishtabai, who seduces drunks to never be seen again. These creatures and many more can be found in the Legends of Belize books. Learn about the cryptozoological, paranormal, and unexplained creatures that haunt Belize. Be fascinated, be terrified, Belize. Legend of Belize books are available in print and ebook. Buy your copy from your favorite online bookstore such as Amazon, KDP, Apple Books, and many more. Also be sure to visit legendsofbelize.com.
I'm excited to announce an event coming up hosted by one of our sponsors, the Wonders Oddities Expo. This event is going to be October 8th and 9th in the Monroeville, PA Convention Center from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. There's going to be performers, vendors, speakers, a costume contest, and so much more. I'm going to be there too with my table set up, going to be recording some featured stories, and I got some fun new merch as well, so I would love to see you there. Our first featured story of the night comes in from Raven.
So my name is Raven. I'm from Hermitage, Pennsylvania, and I just have a couple different ones, like paranormal, like seeing ghosts, seeing UFOs, stuff like that.
Okay, so we get a ghost story and a UFO story.
Yeah.
Okay.
When I was younger, me and my dad would go out and watch stars, and the one night, it happened a couple nights, we saw stuff moving, and we were like, oh, that's not an airplane, and then, because the lights weren't blinking, and we realized that it was a UFO, and we were like, oh, that's kind of, like, it messed with our eyes, because we were looking at the stars again, and we were like, oh, every star is moving, but they weren't, because it was so bright, and we were like, oh, well, that's weird. We don't have any, like, footage or anything because we didn't think to pull it out.
You never do.
Right. It's just one of those things that are like, oh, well, it happened, and it was just like, we stood there half an hour maybe just watching them, and it was crazy.
How many you think?
Maybe like 2 or 3 at least. I don't know.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And how old were you?
I was maybe around 10.
Okay.
So that was fun. And then when I was in 5th grade, I want to say, I came out of my bedroom, and this blue orb, like right in front of my face, it flew out, turned the corner, and out my kitchen.
Ooh.
And I was scared, and I tried to wake my parents up. They wouldn't wake up. They were like dead asleep. And then I went back to my room just scared. And there was more that happened. I mean, one time I thought my dad said, honey, I'm home. And I was like, Mom, is Dad home? Because he ran to the store to get some groceries.
Uh-huh.
And she was like, no, that's not him. And I was like, oh, okay. it was pretty insane.
Wow.
Yeah.
Has anything happened since then?
Well, my mom recently, she does clearings and stuff sometimes.
Okay.
And her voice has been messed up because we have this house spirit named Amelia. We have a lot of spirits in our house. But this one house spirit, she's really upset because one of our friends was supposed to be writing a story about her, and he's going really slow. And she's upset. So after my mom got home from doing the clearing, her voice has been messed up. And I've been having trouble sleeping ever since she got back from doing the clearing.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if, I think it's related because before I slept perfectly fine, and now it's just all messed up. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Raven. Our next story is from Kat Lang.
Hi, my name is Kat Lang. I am co-director for the Paranormal Clergy. I've been doing that for about 11 or 12 years now, and I have a UFO story that I'd like to share.
Awesome.
So this is back in 1997. I'm from Seattle, Washington, but I lived in Puyallup, which is about 30 miles away from Mount Rainier, and I lived in a 3-bedroom apartment on South Hill, and I was in a dead sleep. I mean it. I was in a dead sleep. I woke, and the room was bright lime green.
Oh, wow.
And I looked over to the blinds from my bed. It's about 1:15 in the morning, and it was coming through the blinds, but the blinds were closed. So with the blinds closed, why is it, my walk-in closet was green. The bathroom was green.
What?
And I swear to God, I thought I was going to sit up and see little gray men standing in front of me. I just got this weird feeling.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, I'm going to get up because the hallway was black. It was just my bedroom. I got up, ran down the hall, ran to the right, looked up at the clock to see what time it was so I would know if I was missing time.
Yeah.
Nothing else was lime green, but it was coming right into the bedroom. Opened the door to the deck, and it went off. Just I have no idea. We called the sheriff. The sheriff came out. They investigated it. There was nobody living across from us at the time. There's nothing that could have made that bright of a green.
Wow.
I still, to this day, have no idea what that was.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how long ago was this?
1997.
Wow, and it's still so vivid.
It is. These are the kind of things when you tell stories about a Bigfoot experience or like a UFO experience, you're never going to forget it.
Nope.
I don't know why, but I won't. So anyways, that's my story. Hope you guys all have a great day, and God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kat. Up next, Cash.
My name's Cash. I'm from Indiana, and this is a story from when I was a child. I was probably about 7 or 8. My younger brother was maybe a year old. We had a long hallway in our house, and I was in a separate room one day and heard a sound like a door moving in the hallway. And I went out to see what it was. The entire family was outside besides me and my brother. I looked down the hallway, and there's this gigantic, probably 7-foot tall shadow type figure, humanoid but not quite human. And it turns and looks at me, and just a warped face, if you could call it a face. Just instantly a bad feeling. I didn't go down that hallway for about 3 months. I lived out of the living room, kitchen, and bathroom. I made my mother go pack a bag out of my bedroom. I would not go down the hallway. And I never felt right in that house after that.
And thank you, Cash. If you want your story to be one of our featured stories, make sure you send me an email, firesideparanormalpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll get you on. Also, just to give a quick heads up, the Halloween episode is going to be coming up pretty quick, so if you have a story that you'd like to be on that show, I would like it to be 100% listener stories for the entire episode. Start thinking now about what you want to talk about and send me that email. Let's get it all started. I don't want to get to my guest. Join me by the fire as we welcome author Nick Pease. He has written the spiritual thriller Revelation. Nick, you with us?
Yeah, absolutely. It's lovely to be with you, Jordan. It's late evening over here in the UK, but It's a delight to be with you.
Well, I appreciate you being flexible. I know time zones are killer for podcasting.
Yeah.
So,
but we make it work, so no worries.
Where in the UK are you?
Well, I'm near Gloucester in the West Country. It's nice countryside round here. Although I'm originally from London, but yeah, I live now in the country.
That's exciting. You know, that's just stories that we kind of fantasize here in the U.S. Oh, London, and you're living the dream, Nick.
Well, London's still a good city, I think, but the countryside is beautiful as well. Very green at this time of year. Very nice.
Very good. Tell me about this book. You wrote a spiritual thriller.
Yeah, it's a bit, it's kind of almost unique in a way, dare I say, because people don't write those kind of books. But I guess it's because I'm drawing on all my experience, which is quite rare in some ways, because although I'm a spiritual medium, I also have a degree in philosophy.
Oh, wow.
I take an interest in religions and scientific developments, and I bring all that to bear in this book. And the whole idea of the book, it's a thriller, so you can read it purely as a thriller, but the whole idea behind it is the question, what if somebody could develop a device which could 100% prove life after death as a scientific fact? And that's actually what happens in the book. Two brilliant scientists who are working on a completely different project, quite by accident, without giving too much away, do make the discovery that life after death is a 100% scientific fact. And then the whole book takes off and becomes quite a cat and mouse chase, because it's quite a dilemma that I hope those who would read the book would think about it for themselves and think, you know what, if that really did happen, what would be the implications? Would we all just rejoice and accept it, or would some people find it a threat? And that's what does happen in the book. Some people find it a threat to their status quo, the political, religious status quo, etc. And it suddenly becomes a chase to destroy not just the device, but also the inventors. And that's what the book's about. And it's very fast paced. It's a very quick read. There's a lot of action. There's a lot of fun characters. There's humor. There's romance. There's everything sort of packed into it. And it gallops along towards what I think is a beautifully life-affirming conclusion. I'm not going to give it away, obviously, but that's basically it. It's really posing the question, look, we know all of us can get glimpses of the afterlife. Mm-hmm. You can go and see spiritual mediums, and they will hopefully give you good evidence of life after death. But actually what we all are searching for is cast iron proof. And we don't have that at the moment. But what if it could happen? And that's the whole basis of the book.
So I got a question for you. Like, what stance do you take, if you can tell me, with the book?
Yeah.
Are you talking like, hey, we have ghosts, or hey, we have past lives, or, or hey, there's heaven and hell? Like, what stance are you kind of pointing at?
Yeah, I'm very much focusing on the fact that there is an afterlife and that we live on. I don't get into a lot of things like past lives, although that fascinates me. And I'm toying with the fact that my next book might well be about reincarnation.
Oh, nice.
But that's a completely separate subject. But yeah, I do deal with the question of heaven and hell, because for me, with my experience and what I've learned throughout my life, is that the kind of human fabrications of what heaven and hell might be don't exist in that dimension. The afterlife is completely different. There are many, many aspects to the afterlife, many dimensions to the spirit world. And that's more what I try to explore within the book. It's much more about, once you can prove that we live on after this life, then, what are the implications of that? I've had direct experience of that. When I was a child, I could first hear spirits.
Oh, really?
Then in my teens, I could see them. I then developed as a spiritual medium at the Spiritualist Association of Great Britain in London, going back well over 30 years, when I sat in circle with some of the best mediums who were around at the time. And so I bring all that knowledge to bear in the book, but I also, when I studied philosophy, I bring that to bear as well. Now, the reason I did that is because I don't just accept things at face value, even though I was having these extraordinary experiences, hearing and then seeing spirits.
Can I ask you some questions on those?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like, when you were seeing them, I know you said it was a very young age. What did they look like to you?
First I heard them. So at the age of 5,
okay, yeah.
When I could actually see them, they look, and people who I knew, who I saw, because I could see other people, other spirit beings as well, and including animals, I might as well add to that, which is fascinating. They look absolutely beautiful. They look in their prime, as they would have been on this existence. But in terms of, they slightly shimmer. It's a kind of, they look solid, but they're not solid. It's a kind of shimmering appearance that they have. There's usually quite a lot of light around them as well. And in fact, I not long ago, I woke up in the early hours to find the spirit of a very dear musician friend who'd passed a few years before, standing beside my bed. And she'd passed quite suddenly. And she looked absolutely beautiful, younger than when I knew her, but unmistakably her. And again, she was kind of shimmering, but in a beautiful light-coloured clothing. I couldn't even describe it as clothing in the sense that we would understand clothing, just very loose sort of garments. Beautiful smile on her face and just exuding pure love and serenity. I mean, it was just so beautiful. So they're very recognizable if they're people you've known when they've been alive in your lifetime. And even those you haven't known are still recognizable as human beings. The only point of distraction there is when you might be seeing unenlightened beings or darker energies, and they can come in different forms. They can look different. They don't look human always. In fact, quite rarely do they look human. They can look kind of animalistic at times, sometimes quite disfigured. It's a vast subject in itself, Jordan, just the different aspects of spiritual energy.
How often do you see that type of entity?
Thankfully, not that often. Sometimes it's quite disconcerting. And I tend to protect myself. I take great care in trying to protect myself from those sort of energies. I always say to people, it's not that I talk about things like evil, but there are definitely darker energies out there. There are unenlightened beings. There are people who've passed over who led, how do we describe it, difficult lives here, or unpleasant lives as we would describe them in this existence, and who, they carry that dark energy with them, and I don't want to be open to it. So
no, I don't blame you.
Yeah, I tend to close myself off to it, and I tend to ask for protection from my guides and helpers. And that's what I often say to people when they start looking into developing as a medium or getting more involved in, let's call it psychic things for want of a better description. I always say, do be careful. You do need to develop in the right way. You need to be guided by people who really can do it professionally with you in a way, they can really talk you through it so that you're always protected and you know how to protect yourself, because otherwise you're going about just opening yourself up and anything can come into you. not just the good, but also the unenlightened. I don't call it bad, but I just call it unenlightened, the darker elements. And then you can forge attachments, which can cause mischief, etc. So, yeah, you have to be a bit careful.
So, Nick, when I know you say you guard yourself, right? So, in my mind, if you can see that, for somebody who doesn't see things like that, right? So, like, I'm picturing, okay, like you're just walking down the road and you see a bunch of people and you just have like, there's one over here and one over here, one over here. They're just kind of like glowing and shimmering, and you're like, "Yep, they're dead. They're dead. They're dead."
No, not quite like that. No. That's more like a movie, I think. But no, it tends to be, in fact, almost inevitably, it's in quiet moments.
Okay.
Often when I'm alone, particularly when I meditate, but spirits can be very active in the stillness. You probably know yourself, because I know you've done some of this work yourself. When things are very quiet, that's why you often see spirits in the early hours of the morning or whatever. Things are still. The whole point about spiritual existence anyway is about vibration, and in the noise and bustle and everyday nonsense that goes on in our everyday lives, it's very hard for that kind of spiritual energy to manifest. Whereas in silence or in quiet, you can get that, which is why, particularly going back to when I was sitting in circle, for example, at the SAGB, we would literally sit in darkness with a very, very diffused light in one corner, just in case anybody needed to leave the room or something. But usually the room would be locked. We would sit in circle in absolute silence, and in those circumstances, it's quite good to have an environment where it's conducive to spirit presence. So no, it's not like walking down the road and seeing them left, right, and centre. It does tend to happen in still moments, which is why when I saw my musician friend, it was the early hours. But people say, "Oh, were you hallucinating, or were you still asleep?" Or saying, "No, absolutely not. I was wide awake." When I woke up and first saw her, I thought, "Oh my goodness," and then made myself fully awake. I reached out to touch her hand gently, and in that moment she disappeared. But it was it was one of the most beautiful experiences of my life.
Wow.
And when you have those, how can you not accept that there are other dimensions, that there are, that we do live on, that there are more things than we understand. And for me, I've always liked to question it. I've always wanted to find out more. I seek after truth, and I shall do it for the rest of my life. But I will examine things. I won't just accept it, even though I know spiritual existence as a reality. That's exactly why I studied philosophy, which is a very analytic, forensic, ruthless study of the nature of existence and what life is all about, the meaning of life. Is there a God? What's our position in the universe, etc., etc. Putting all those under a microscope and asking those questions. So I'm fascinated by it all.
So I have a lot of questions with everything that you just dug into.
Great.
So put your boots on. No, so
Yeah, good.
Okay, so I want to start with you were sitting in circle, right?
Yes.
And you started to explain that a little bit. Now, what does that mean? What does that group do? What is the purpose? What do you get out of it?
Yeah, well, I was fortunate enough to sit in circle at the Spiritualist Association of Great Britain in London, which is the sort of headquarters of, I guess, the spiritualist movement. I'm going to add very quickly there that I don't call myself a spiritualist, and the reason for that is I don't like labels.
Okay.
I think labels divide us. Are you this faith? Are you that faith? Are you whatever? Are you agnostic or whatever? We're all, in my mind, part of humankind. We are all spirits in the material world. We are made from love, and we return to love, and love is the guiding principle. So I don't want to adhere to one particular movement or anything. But having said that, obviously I had to sit in circle because that's how you develop as a medium. Well, sitting in circle, what that means is that a group of you who want to do that, I can only speak, well, no, I've done it beyond the SAGB actually, but particularly when I was at the SEB, we were about a group of about 12 of us, I guess, led by one of the best mediums of the time. And we would literally sit round on chairs in a circle, not holding hands or anything, but just sitting around so that the energy from all of us could be combined. And then the door is locked, the lights are put off and everything. And then the medium who is holding the circle, and there's no talking or anything like that, will guide you through a meditation where you learn how to protect yourself and open up to spiritual existence. And that takes time and dedication. Even if you have natural psychic abilities, which everybody in the world does, but mine seemed to be very heightened as a child because obviously I could hear and then see them. That was way before I got to the SAGB. But once there, sitting in circle really develops you and helps you to bring those talents out in a far, far greater way. And you do that. We would sit once a week. And when you're not sitting in circle, when you're at home, you meditate as well. And there's no one way to meditate, as you know, but in terms of spiritual meditation, it does tend to have the focus of opening yourself up to spiritual influence. And that's why it's so vital that you protect yourself. And that's the sort of thing you learn in circle as well. And then you learn how to accept spirit evidence, how to examine it and test it and make sure you're getting it genuinely from spirit, to ask spirit questions and be led by them and guided by them. They never come to judge. They never come to say you're right, you're wrong. They just come with love, absolute love. And it's the most beautiful thing. So that's what sitting in circle involves.
So it's kind of fine-tuning your skills, right?
Yes.
I'm hearing that. But also, like, do you call on a spirit and then you all are like bringing that spirit in and asking questions? Like, is it one big group experience with like that, or?
It can vary. I mean, you do different things every time you sit in circle. What often happens is that the medium will bring a guest in, for example, somebody who isn't necessarily at all developed as a medium or anything like that, but obviously has an interest in the afterlife. Sit them down next to her. Our medium, in my case, was a lady. And then as we sit in circle and go into meditation, we open up and try to give that person evidence of life after death. And if we find that we have particular relatives or whatever who want to come through and speak to her or him, we will do that. And each person in the circle, often you will be picking up on the same things that other people are doing, and you kind of complement one another in what you bring, because somebody will say something and you say, yes, I've got that as well, but it's XYZ. But there's a lot more to it than that. And also in circle, you will get involved in a lot of other things, like we had a trance medium visit once. You have people who come in and can kind of talk about all kinds of different aspects of spiritual philosophy. So there's really a lot to it. If you're going to develop as a genuine spiritual medium, there is a lot to it.
Wow, a lot. Yeah, a lot goes into that, it sounds like.
Yeah.
All right, I have another question, and this is, I don't know, I hate to go from something serious like you were just talking about to something lighthearted.
Let's go.
But you were talking about animals, right?
Yeah.
Now, do all animals have spirits, or some animals?
Well, you're getting into quite a big subject there.
Oh, well, I'm going to interrupt you because in my head, again, like you said, hey, you're looking at like a movie.
Yeah.
All I can think about is like let's talk about like bugs, like a bug zapper,
no,
mosquitoes.
no,
Now that
no.
the whole air is full of all these dead bugs flying around.
No.
Or here's another one.
Yeah.
Chickens, right? I don't know about the UK, but in the US we are consumers, right?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of all these chickens that have been slaughtered for my belly, right?
Yeah.
Like the whole US is like got 2 foot deep of chicken ghost all over. Like,
no, it's not like that at all. There tend to be group spirits, as it were, and some, in fact, a lot of animals will just pass into a kind of group situation and won't even have an individual aspect to themselves.
what do you mean?
But
I don't understand.
If there's love involved, if you've had a dog or a cat, or even a pig or a cow or whatever that you've really has been more like a pet and everything, and there's been real love. The whole thing about the spiritual vibration is that it exists on love, and you cannot break that love link. And those animals will exist in some form in the spirit world, and sometimes in fact people see their pets the pets who've passed over, and they will see them. But it is a complex subject because, no, you're absolutely right. Not all those little bugs and things. No, they don't.
Nobody loves them.
Yeah, but they all. But having said that, each one plays a part in our earthly life. Even the ones we may not particularly like, they have a reason for existing, and all part of the circle of life, to quote a particular musical. And so they all have a very, very defined role. And in the spiritual sense, from the guides and helpers and people who talk to us about it, that's the importance of their lives. But as an individual spirit, not as much. So you would find that on the spiritual plane, there are, instead of like individuals like you and I, there are like group clusters, if you like.
Kind of like they melted together.
Well, in a kind of funny way, yeah, you could take that view and just don't have that individual energy, because they didn't hardly had it when they were on the earth plane. But if you're talking about, like, pigs are very intelligent, for example, and you've got, and I've known many people who've had pigs as, farmers, and people who have become very attached to their animals, and there has been, love or between them as such, and they've really had feelings for them. Then that, if there is love can never be broken in a spiritual, energetic sense. And that's how spirit come to us. They come with love. And it is the greatest force in the universe. And that's why the shape of the world today, in many respects, is so disappointing, because there is so much conflict and hatred and people at each other's throats, when we should all be working together to feed, clothe and shelter each other, live in peace and harmony and everything. And I think we've lost the spiritual aspect of our lives that really guides us in that way. Now, whether you do that by having a particular faith, and I respect all faiths, whether you do it by not having any faith at all, that's fine too, if that's what, floats your boat. But I believe that a greater spirituality of necessity then makes you view this world in a different way. And you can only live your life as best we can, or none of us are perfect, but as best we can, trying to be as spiritual as we can. And I think if that guides us, the whole world would be a better place.
Very well said. And I did hear you at one point, and this was on another podcast, quote Bill Clinton. And
yes,
I thought about that since I heard it. You want to share that?
Yeah, well, it was, and whatever your views of Bill Clinton, I know he's a controversial character, but I think it was after he'd left. Yeah, it was definitely after he'd left the presidency. He gave a speech, I think it was to the United Nations, but it was a very important assembly anyway. And he actually said what many people had already been believing, that we could actually feed everybody in the world. We could provide clean water to everybody in the world. We could provide shelter. We could look after everybody if we had the will. And there's the problem. If we had the will, if you could combine all the billionaires in the world, if you could get all the governments and knock their heads together and say, look, you actually have the ability to do this. And that's the sad thing. We the European Union over here, Britain is no longer part of it, but we had crazy situations, I think they still exist now, where people were actually destroying food, throwing it away, because there were particular rules as to how much butter you could produce, or how much fish you could take, or whatever. And rather than give it away or anything, people would destroy it. And it's just nuts. And I think what Bill Clinton was saying is, can we not motivate that public will that to do that? In the current climate, not a chance, because you've got the situation in Ukraine that shows that you've got particular ideologies that just are not about compassion necessarily, or looking after people or whatever. It's more about grabbing land, or there is an ideology that wants to subjugate people for a particular end. You've got situations in the Middle East which are quite horrendous. You've got abuses of human rights going on all around the world. It's that's the dark side. Obviously, there's a huge upside as well. There are millions upon millions of people who are working to try and make it a better world. But really, until we can motivate everybody and get everybody on the same page, we're going to have these difficulties. And I guess that that's where I keep coming back to discovering spirituality. And it's what drove me in the end to write my book Revelation, because I wanted to say to people, just think about it. The world being in the state that it's in at the moment, etc., we really need a wake-up call. We need something big to happen. We need, who knows what. Some people hang on to the idea that there could be a second coming, that Jesus would come back or something like that, or aliens will land, or whatever it might be. I think far more in practical terms, and I think, because I know that the spirit life is a reality, my book Revelation poses that question of, well, hang on, what if life after death could 100% be proved to be a scientific fact? What would that do to the world? Would that suddenly galvanize people and make people think, you know what we're doing is crazy. We've got to live in peace and harmony. We've got to show compassion and toleration to all living things. We've got to mend our environment. We've got to do these things because we're part of something much bigger. We come from spirit, we are spirit, we return to spirit. With that perspective, surely it puts this life into some kind of a different perspective, and you think, yeah, that has implications on how I should try and live this life. And yes, you might say, well, hang on, don't religions do that? At their heart, yes, they do. But many of them have lost their way. They've been perverted to the ends of those in power. And that whole aspect of life after death, many of them say, well, you shouldn't go there. You shouldn't get involved. It's kind of, you're dabbling with the occult or that kind of thing. That's just fear and nonsense. That's just dogma. That's just people in power wanting to subjugate the people. And it was never what the real prophets preached. Jesus himself said to his disciples, if you want to reach out to God, do so in your own homes. You don't have to go to the temples. And of course, he was preaching power to the people. It was one of the reasons he was crucified and put to death. He was seen as dangerous by those in power. And remembering that in those days, church and state were one and the same. So we've
not
seen
just
this,
those in power, those in religious power.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen this happen throughout history. Now, I don't have a beef against religion at all. In fact, quite the opposite. I think that there's some wonderful things that religion can do and has done and hopefully will continue to do. But what I will stand against is dogma and fear and subjugation of people and the suppression of free thinking. And for me, it's a reality that life after death is a truth. I fully accept that not everybody can accept that, and nor should they. I welcome skepticism. And I would never preach to people and say, well, you've got to believe it because I'm telling you. That's not what I stand for at all. I believe in free thinking. I am a free thinker myself, and I say to people, find your own truth. I did. Even though I could see and hear spirits, I studied philosophy deliberately to challenge myself. And then I developed as a spiritual medium. And then I took a great interest in the religions and the scientific developments of the world because I wanted to have that knowledge and that grounding so that when I wrote my book Revelation, although you can read it very quickly as just at face value as a thriller, though I say it myself, it has real depth because it brings to bear all that sort of philosophical, spiritual thought and the science and religion of the day and puts it into a book and says, well, think about that. Although you're reading it as a thriller, there's some real deep questions there that I hope make people think. And I've been very heartened that the feedback I keep getting from people is very positive in that sense. A lot of people will say to me, wow, I always thought that, but you really made me think by putting it into a book. So if it does that, I'll be delighted.
Well, let me ask you, because, authors, they always dig down and they have their base somewhere. They built the story around something personal.
Yeah.
And I know you said, as far as like the peace and love and everybody getting together, but as far as the life after death part of it, where personally for you was that muse?
Well, that really started when I was 5 years old and I could first hear spirits. And then, of course, in my teens when I could see them. But it wasn't until my late teens, early 20s that I really started to investigate.
Okay.
And so although I could accept it at face value for what I was seeing and hearing, that wasn't good enough for me. I wanted to examine it. And I think I've mentioned on various times before, and I put it in the book. There's a bit at the end of the book from the author where I explore these things. And I actually say that one of the things about philosophy, which I find so powerful, and I really think it's one of the most useful things I've ever studied in my life, because it is so analytical and forensic in its study of the nature of existence, is recognizing, which a lot of people don't think about, but actually when they hear it, they think, yeah, that's true, that how we construct our world is through the five senses. So what we can see, hear, feel, touch, taste, and smell, that's how we get our picture of the world. And if anything exists outside of that, we tend to say, oh, that's the supernatural or the paranormal or whatever. And my view is there is no such thing as the supernatural. Everything is working according to natural laws. What the thing is, most people don't recognize that there are far more heightened senses with the animal kingdom, for example, in which you can interrelate with this world. So we may not be able to see and hear things, but most people who have dogs and cats will tell you stories of how they won't go in certain rooms, their hackles will rise at particular times late at night or something when they're perceiving something. There are countless examples in the animal kingdom of how they can do things, see things, hear things, taste things, whatever it might be. Like dogs have a sense of smell, which I gather is something like 1,000 times greater than ours.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, we can't even begin to recognize what that might be. So for me, it's like saying, actually recognize our limitations, recognize that this life after death and everything about our own existence is, we're still so young in learning about it. If you think about our knowledge, in fact, most of our sophisticated knowledge has come in the last 100 years, which is just the blink of an eye. And we're learning so much more, and I hope we will continue to do so and investigate in an ethical way how animals do have these heightened senses, which are far more heightened than ours, and how they relate to the world in that way. And investigating energy. We know that everything is made up of energy, and scientists are now beginning to investigate it more and more. And spirit exists on an energetic plane, which is far more heightened than ours. And I think in time, that's the dilemma I'm posing in my book, I think there will come a time when scientists do create a device that can actually pick up the existence of spirits. I know there are thousands of paranormal groups around the world who go out looking for spirits, but at the moment they don't have the right equipment. Nobody does. And I think one day it will happen. I think it'll happen completely by accident, as indeed most scientific things do. You look at the history of science, almost any great advances in science have come about completely by accident. They aren't actually looking for something when they discover whatever it might be. The apple falling from the tree for Newton, he didn't shake the tree, it fell. The discovery of penicillin, all these things, they're not necessarily looking for what might happen. And I think energetic research, the more and more they get into that, the more that they might stumble across a device that actually picks up higher vibrations.
How far out do you think we are from that?
I've said to people before, it could happen any day. I'm not privy to all the scientific research that's going on in energy, but suffice to say it is vast. Whether people are, it's space exploration, whether it's further work on atomic structures, etc. There's a great deal of work going on in the whole essence of what makes up our universe and us, and we now accept and know that it's all to do with energy. And so more and more they will be investigating this. And so, as I say, it could happen tomorrow, or possibly not in my lifetime. It could happen in many, many years to come. Who knows? But I think it is a possibility. And that's the thing about my book as well, Jordan, just very quickly to say that everything in Revelation, although it is a fictional novel, a thriller, it's not science fiction, because everything in the book is posited in the reality of the day. So anything I refer to, whether it be scientific, whether it be religious, whether it be philosophical, whether it be spiritual, relates to what we know today, relates to our knowledge today. It is not made up. So that gives the story credibility, it gives the characters credibility, it gives the whole plot and the ups and downs, and it's not straightforward, although we're talking about the discovery of scientific discovery of life after death. When that happens, and I'll give that much away, how all the individual characters react to it is a completely different sort of kettle of fish. And that's what makes the excitement of the story. And can the people who invented Revelation get it out into the public domain before it and they get destroyed by those who want to maintain the status quo? So there's many subplots and excitement. As I say, there's all kinds of characters, some fun, humorous characters as well. There's a lot going on. There's a romance element as well. And it gallops along at a pace because they're short chapters, it's pacey, it's thrilling. And I wrote it like that because I wanted to I didn't want it to be heavy, and it isn't heavy. It's a very quick, easy read. And that's what I wanted to do.
But it's provoking thought.
Yeah, exactly that. That's exactly what I wanted to do. Because and the reason it can do that is because a lot of people will say, I recognize that, I understand that, I've always thought that, I've always wondered that. And when you can push those buttons as an author, it's very powerful, because then you're talking to people on a level that they understand and welcome. And they say, yeah, this is where I'm at. Some people will say, I've never dared to say anything about it. Countless people around the world every year, I mean, in their millions, will have spiritual experiences. but so many will be afraid of recounting them for fear of being ridiculed or whatever, particularly those who might be in the military or the police or have a position of authority, etc. I mean, in the White House, Lincoln's ghost has been seen many times, even by past presidents. But we don't talk about these things. We sort of hide them, and we say, well, we're frightened to talk about it. And actually, we should be saying, what's going on here? Let's find out more. So these are vast subjects, but I'm, as you can probably tell, I'm very excited by them, and I absolutely every day. In fact, today I was reading another book about these things, and that's what I do. I just strive for greater knowledge and to find out more.
So where do people find your book? Where can they find you?
Yeah, well, it's available with most large online bookstores. I mean, Amazon obviously is the one that comes to mind. It's certainly on there, and you can read reviews about it. You can read a synopsis of it as well. So if people are interested, they can get a very good idea of what it is and how people are reacting to it. But also, I don't know what online bookstores you have in the States, but people like Waterstones and Blackwell's, it's online there. Or you could just go into any bookshop, and if you said, could you order me Revelation by Nick Pease, all they have to do is go on their computers and they will find it. Or you can get it from the publisher, Cranthorpe Milner. Go on their website, cranthorpemilner.com, and you'll find it there. And if anybody still has difficulty, they want to get in touch with me, I'm on Instagram, Pease_Nick, and I'm very happy for people to contact me, and I'll guide them to find it if necessary.
I was going to ask if you were open to, for folks to reach out if they had any questions or they wanted to discuss your book.
Absolutely, I'm very open to that. That's probably the best is through Instagram. It's Pease_Nick. That's my tag, and I welcome sharing my knowledge or whatever with people. As I say, I won't try to preach to them. I won't try to tell them what to believe or not to believe. But because I have, though I say it myself, a wealth of experience gained over my whole lifetime of spiritual, philosophical, religious, scientific, etc. I'm not an expert in science by any means, but I do take an interest in the developments that are very relevant to energy and spiritual existence and things. So I can talk from that point of view, but particularly in philosophical and spiritual terms, I'm very happy to share with people what I know, and even experiences like I mentioned that experience I had recently of my musician friend standing beside my bed. I'll happily tell people stories about the kind of encounters I've had with spirits, and they are the most profound, most uplifting experiences of my life, because they just show me that there is so much more to this world. And I often quote that lovely line from Shakespeare in his play Hamlet, where Hamlet says, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. And my goodness, wasn't he right?
Very cool, Nick. It was a pleasure having you on. I think everybody should go find your book and read it. I think it sounds amazing.
Well, that's very kind. And it was a pleasure to be on, Jordan. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
We are out of time for this, but we will have you back on. And you have a good night, sir.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
With that, the fire is out. Thank you so much, Nick, and thank all of you for listening this week. If you haven't had the opportunity yet to connect online, Fireside Paranormal Hub is the Facebook group. I'm on TikTok at Fireside Parapod, Parapod, Instagram, TikTok. We also have our Patreon. Go to patreon.com/Fireside Paranormal. We have tiers starting at just $1, a great way to support the show. And we have giveaways, merch, name drops, a private Discord server, all kinds of fun stuff. And check out the website, firesideparanormal.com, to get your sweet, sweet Fireside merch. That is all the time we have for this week. Until next week, everybody, don't be afraid. only believe.